So today is the review for the Chapter 1 test. As I start the video here, I'm just giving the kids a moment to graph this and then give the final answer as an interval. You might be like, well, isn't that already an interval? Yes, it is, but it's two intervals that can be combined and simplified. Then there's a third notation you're supposed to know, which is set builder. Just to clarify, this is only x's. So you would start your set builder with the set of x such that, and then you could say more. So give it in all three ways. But first simplify this, and my best advice on that is always graph it. And then you can kind of see, oh, it's really only from here to here. And then you can say, okay, then what I should give as my interval. It's much easier to do the interval once you see the graph. And then set builder, always on your set builders, do a union or an intersect. The only way I would accept this answer if it didn't have a union or an intersect is if you did a sandwich and you were like -4 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5 or something like that. That's not the answer, of course, but you can do a sandwich and that one implies intersect. But on any other answer, you'd need a union or an intersect in your set builder answer. Okay, with that preface, try to answer those three questions. Okay, so there's from 2 to infinity, and here's -1 empty spot to 3, and I'm doing it in a different color, and I think that's a good idea. On a test, I might have used a dark line and a lighter line, or a dotted line and a solid line, or something to just kind of help me see the difference. And then it's a union. That means, remember, that means everything that got invited. So then you really got to ask yourself, did -1 get invited by either group? No, -1 wasn't in this, and -1 wasn't. Oh, wait, it's a bracket there. So it should have been invited. I just messed it up. So I'm glad I really checked that close, because the -1 has a bracket on it. So it got invited by one of the groups. Okay, and then clearly everything that got shaded, so like all of these things along here, they all got invited. How about the 2? Did the 2 get invited? Yeah, it got invited by both groups. All right, and how about the 3? The 3 got invited. All it takes is one invite because it's a union. If it was an intersect, you'd have to be invited by both groups. All right, so basically, that means the answer is just from -1 to infinity. Now, be honest, because I could do an extra practice on this. How many of you had that right? All right, that's the vast majority. If you really want to talk to me in the last 10 minutes, I can do another for you up in front. Set builder, that's, well, now that I see this, that's pretty easy. It's just x has to be greater than -1. Now, I made a big deal about how you have to have a symbol, but if there's only one fact like that, you don't have to have a union or an intersect, okay? Because what am I supposed to union that with what? You know, like, or am I intersect that with what? So there's only one fact. If there was another fact, like, oh, and x has to be less than 5, you for sure have to tell me if it's a union of those two or an intersect of those two. But since this is only one thing, it doesn't have to have a union or an intersect. I should have given you that as another example of the kind you don't have to have a union or intersect for. All right, now one last thing. I kind of was vague about the 1. Sometimes I had it filled in, sometimes I didn't. Let's talk it through. Is the 1 filled in or not? Yes, it should be a bracket right there. So should this have exactly the way I said it? If it's a bracket on the -1, shouldn't this be or equal to? Nobody corrected me. You got to be really careful. Don't be shy about it. Hey, I think that should be filled in, or I think that should be or equal to. All right. So there's one kind. Here's a kind that's a little more complicated. Set builder, x comma y, such that x is greater than or equal to 1, and y is 4. And if I didn't say anything, it would imply intersect. I'm just going to say intersect. Okay, graph that for me. I'll pause for a second. Okay, so I bet there's some differences. How many of you and your partner weren't exactly the same on this one? Now there's a lot of hands. That means a lot of people would get it wrong, right? Because you can't both be right. So let's do this carefully. Would you agree this is a spot where x is 1? Are you with me that that's kind of a spot where x is 1? Okay, and I want the line. X is 1 or is bigger than 1, so I can go, there's my x equals 1 line. Then it's solid. Why is it solid versus dotted? Because it's or equal to. That's why it's a solid line. Otherwise, it would have been dotted. Now I'm going to shade this way. Next, it's intersect, so that means only what's both, right? And then here's y equals 4 line. Y equals 4, let's say that's where 4 is, and y is going right through 4. And now remember, that left alone, that's the union. Okay? And that, where they double overlap, you know, where they both got shaded, that's like this green part right there. And that's what you wanted because it was an intersect. So all of this has to go away. And your final answer is just that. Raise your hand if you had that one right. All right. But there's a fair number of people that made a mistake there. So what if you were bad at that? Well, you could go back and practice that. There's a whole assignment that had like a bunch of those on it. Go back and do some of those. And remember how I told you to skip some of them? Well, those will be the perfect ones to do now. You know what I mean? It's like those are a nice little bank of problems you never did because I told you to skip them. And, well, maybe you did them already. That's fine. But you can go back and do that worksheet over again, especially the ones I told you to skip before. All right. Let's do a little bit of probability. All right. So I'm going to make, please make 4 green marbles and 2 red ones. What's the probability of getting a red, keeping it out, because that matters. You get a red, you keep it out, and then you get a green. What's the probability of that? Pause for a second. You've reached in and it's dark. You can't like purposely pick because obviously then it'd be a 100% chance you'd get them right unless you're red-green colorblind. All right, so this is in the dark. Probability of red then a green, pausing. Okay, let's go with Sam. What did you say?
1/3, which is 2 over 6.
Oh, you did. I like that. 2 out of 6. We'll start with that, and yes, that reduces. And then?
And then, since there's only 5 marbles left, and there's 4 green times 4/5.
4 out of 5. Good. So that is an extremely likely scenario. Can you tell me the exact final answer?
4/15.
All right, it would have been 8 over 30, which you would then reduce to 4 over 15, and that is the right answer. Raise your hand if you had that one right with him. Good. Okay, now, what else did we learn? There's a lot of things we learned. Evan, you got a comment? Or? Oh, I just still raising your hand. Okay. So then, we learned a lot of things. Can you think of anything else that's like on the easy side? And then we'll move to the ones that are like more R3-ish. Well, then I guess it's just a judgment call between, you know, what's easy and what's not. So, to make it one, I'll make an easy one of these Venn diagram problems then. All right, let's make it A and B, and then a box around it. And I'd like you to do A union, not B. Shade in the answer of A union, not B. Now, we'll step it up a notch and say intersect with C. So if that first one was fairly easy for you, now this makes it more R3-ish, like the harder questions on the test. So in case you're not used to high school math tests up through pre-calc, it's this style of grading called Marzano grading. This guy was an educational expert, and so the tests are shorter but harder. And there's 13 questions. An old school honors pre-calc test would have probably had 35 questions, literally. But a ton of them would have been easy, and there would have probably only been maybe 2 hard problems on a whole honors pre-calc test. There'd been a few mediums, but only a couple hard ones. Well, on this test, there will be 4 hard ones and 8 easy ones. And that's the way we can kind of like get in 12 questions, we can cover pretty much all the easy stuff and 4 hard problems. But you only have to get 3 out of the 4 hard ones right to get a straight A. So you'd think 3/4 is, it's only 75% right. But there's only 4 questions, so you want to get 3 out of the 4 hard questions right. We're not talking impossible questions, but this could be like one of those 4 hard questions. Not saying it is, saying it could be. If I made it easy like the first thing, that would have been more like an R2, which are one of the easy questions.
Are there like harder ones, not threes?
There is such a thing as an R4, and that's extra credit if you get it right. And R4s are supposed to be something that we never really explained. We could have hinted at it in class, but we never like showed you how to do it. So you have to go above and beyond to like do something we never even showed you how to do. That makes it an R4.
Can I have bonus questions?
It depends on the test. Sometimes there's R4, sometimes there isn't. And if there is an R4, just understand a typical test, only like, I don't know, maybe 2 people, maybe 3, get the R4 right. Because it's like supposed to be super hard. And then if you get it right, you get an extra 5% added onto your test. Except we have a limit of 100%. You cannot get over 100% on a test. Otherwise, we're just straight up grade inflating.
If you have time, you still like.
The reason you'd do it, this reason you'd still do it, even if you thought you had everything right, is there's a good chance you made some dumb mistake on the whole test. And if you have time, do the bonus so that one dumb mistake on the test still knocks you down to a 95. So you're going to get less than the 100, right? So it's kind of like a little insurance problem where you probably made one dumb mistake, even if you're really smart. If you can get the R4 right, that extra 5% will bring you back up to 100. That happens a lot for really smart kids. They make one dumb mistake, but they get the R4 right, then they keep their 100%. Okay, let's see if you did this right. I had the unfortunate, I've had to fix my diagram, so then I erased the problem. Like Marcus, could you reread me the problem?
A union B or not B.
A union,
No, yeah, and then intersect C.
A union not B, is that right? Okay. Intersect C, thank you. All right, here's A, and union with not B. I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to use the same color because it's a union. I know it's all of this stuff. And here's not B. I'm going to start shading in there. Here's not B. And it does overlap. My eye gets drawn to that, but does that really matter in this case? No, because it's a union. Now it's intersect with C. See, I will use a different color for sure. So here's C, and it's where it overlaps with that. So basically, it's everywhere except, I'm going to erase out that little part right there. So it's the green answer. Why am I erasing that part out? Because it wasn't in the other answer, so therefore it can't be in the final answer. And then I have to erase. This is not going to be totally clean, but I think you'll get the idea. Erasing all of these places that it can't be. There. Okay. And there's my final answer. Sort of like a half moon with an extra little lump at the top. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Cool. Okay. Name something we learned on Friday, because I told you that on Friday we covered 2 things that if you couldn't get both of them, that you couldn't get an A on this test. What does that imply? Can you get one of them wrong? Well, yeah, you can get one thing wrong on the test and still get an A. But that implies both those things I told you on Friday were valuable and important. All right, so name one thing I taught you on Friday. You might not know how to say it right, but yes.
Like how to test for symmetry.
All right, so here's an equation. Y equals 4x squared minus 3x. I want you to test for all three kinds of symmetry. Just to clarify, x-axis symmetry, which one is that again? What comma what? If it's x comma negative y. X symmetry, you leave x alone. Y symmetry, you're going to leave the y alone. And origin symmetry, you're going to make them both negative. Pausing for a second. All right, so here's how you would do this one. First off, you rewrite the equation, but I strongly recommend that you put an empty spot for all of the variables. A parentheses specifically, because sometimes it actually matters. Sometimes it wouldn't, but sometimes it does. Okay, so there's the equation with a parenthesis in every spot. And then I'm putting in x wherever x was. Because see, x doesn't change in x symmetry. And a y turns into negative y. So I put a negative y right there. I can tell right now, can't you, that this thing is not going to be the same. Because I'm going to have to get that negative off the y. I'm going to divide everything by a negative. It's going to definitely be different. But if I skip this part and I just say, I move on to the next one, you didn't show me enough work. You got to show what it looks like when it's solved for y. Negative 4x squared plus 3x. I'd be looking for that. If that isn't there, you wouldn't get credit for having checked x symmetry properly. And I wouldn't make you say that there's no x symmetry at this moment. But I would instead, whenever there is a kind of symmetry, I would expect you to say, yup, it has origin symmetry, or it has y-axis symmetry, right? So which did it have? Nobody's saying anything. What does that imply?
No.
Probably didn't have any symmetries. All right, and you're correct. So you don't need to watch me do all of them, but just what would I have checked for y symmetry? The y stays the same, negative x. And for the other kind, the origin symmetry, negative x and negative y. All right, so I'm going to have you check one more, and this one will have a kind of symmetry, and you got to figure out which one. Prove it has this kind of symmetry, or that kind, or two kinds, or even all three. That'd actually be a really good test question to make people prove something has all three kinds of symmetry. So, on this one, did it have a kind of symmetry?
Yeah.
All right. Adam, what kind of symmetry did it have?
So y-axis symmetry.
All right, so if it's y-axis, then that means I should have checked negative x comma y, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stick in negative x wherever there's x, and I go 4, and then negative x squared minus 7, and then the y, and then does that simplify down to the exact same thing as that? Yes, it does. And just to clarify, this becomes 4x squared because the negative times the negative disappears. So here's exactly what happened there. That turned into that, and that is the same. Oh, sorry, that's not a y. It's a 7, Mr. Server. And that's the same as what you had in the first place. Okay, so what else did we learn? On the same day, on Friday. Yes.
X and Y intercept.
Yes, and graphing of complicated things. So let's get a complicated thing here. 4y squared minus 2x squared equals 0. And if I just said what's the x-intercept, it wouldn't be that hard. You'd set y equal to 0. If I just said what's the y-intercept, it wouldn't be that hard. You'd just set x equal to 0 and you'd solve. And then you'd have those points. But what if I said graph it? include the x and y intercepts. Well then, if I just tell you, here's your y-intercepts and here's your x-intercept, do you know exactly what it looks like from that? No, you need to find some more points. So you make an XY chart and you find a few more points. Let's try this one. Everybody try to graph that equation. I'm going to give you a warning. I don't think it's a function. Pretty sure it's not. So that's okay, it's still graphs. It just wouldn't pass the vertical what? Line test. Good. Pausing for a sec. Okay. Got to get going on this one. I need some points. Mira, can you tell me a point? Not an x or y intercept, though. Because those are too easy.
1 over square root of 2.
If I put a 1 here and a 1 here, then I get... Oh, wait. No, just for the x. Sorry, my bad. Just a 1 here. There we go. And then you get 1 over... What did you get?
Square root of 2.
Square root of 2. Can anybody else verify that number? Okay, then I better check it. So this one's 2, and then I subtract... Would you agree that this part right here is just 2? And then I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and I'll have 4y squared is equal to 2. I just added 2 to both sides. Now y squared equals 1/2. Oh, I see what you did, and I bet other people didn't notice what you did. You square rooted this, and then you just simplified the top and said the square root of 1 is 1. I like it. So other people might have said square root of 1/2. But then maybe the reason they weren't echoing you is because there's actually 2 answers. Do you know what both answers are?
Plus or minus.
Yeah, plus or minus that. So that's 2 points. The square root of 1/2 and the negative square root of 1/2. And if you had to graph that, how in the heck are you supposed to graph 1/2, thank you, and the square root of 1/2? Well, I don't know what the square root of 1/2 is, but I know it's a very small decimal, right? So it's a decimal. So I'm going to just say it's something less than 1. So if I was graphing this, I'd look for over 1 and up something less than 1, and I'd put a dot there and a dot there. I know that's pretty generic, but I know that there's 2 points on this graph that are right on top of each other. All right, Adam, can you give me another? You can give me the x or the y-intercept. What did you find there?
I probably did this wrong, but I found the origin with both of them.
All right, we'll double check it. It's really easy. I just put in a 0 here and a 0 there, and 0 equals 0, so you are correct, sir. That doesn't necessarily mean there couldn't have been another y-intercept, but if you found that by just guessing and checking a number, the danger for that is...
Oh, I did.
Okay, good. The danger for that is that there might be more than one answer and you wouldn't know it from that. Okay, so what you should do is you take the 4y squared minus 2x squared, and to find the x-intercept you put in what? Yeah, to find the x-intercept, put in y as 0. That knocks this whole thing out. And then if you solve that, you get x squared equals, well, you divide by negative 2 on both sides. 0 divided by negative 2 is just 0. And so x has to equal 0. Boom, done. And it was not 2 different answers. Cool. How about when you find, that was the one where y was 0, so that must have been the x-intercept. To find the x-intercept, you set y equal to 0, and pretty much the same thing happens, and you get 0, 0. So there's only 1. Cool. Do you get this is probably coming out to something like that for a graph? But if I didn't know that for sure, I'd try to find a few more points, and you would find that there's a few more points that are like this, and they're a little bigger than the last one, and eventually you'd be like, oh, I see a bunch of dots, and if you can't connect all of these dots, if you can't play connect the dots, this class is probably going to be too hard. All right, so that's another topic. What else do you have to know and do? One thing that we haven't talked about yet is probability Venns. You remember that deal where you were going to ask your friends a question, and let's say that 2 people said yes here, 3 people said yes here, 5 people said yes there, and I'm going to stick to my theme was, will you have an EV someday? Will you have a robot someday? And will you have both? All right. Could you please turn that into a probability Venn for me? You can use fractions. Turn it into a probability Venn. Then I want to know what's the probability of not, nope, I'm going to do EV, electric vehicle, union,
Scared of robot.
robots. And I'm going to put 0 out here on purpose to show that nobody said they would have neither. Pausing. All right, so first off, we needed to change this to a probability Venn. So this would have been a decimal. 2 out of what? 10? Could I have put 0.2 there then? Okay. How about the middle section? I could have put 0.3 then, right? And if that's 0.2 and 0.3, then the other one must be 0.5. Yes?
So just to clarify, for our Venn diagram project, can we keep our probabilities in fractions, or do we have to put them in decimals?
I don't think it's specified, therefore you can use either one. Okay, now, what's my EV union R? Well, that's all of these added up. 100%. Raise your hand if you get that one right. Cool. Now I'm going to flip it. What if it's an intersect? Did you get 0.3? That's where they intersect. Intersect means where they overlap. Could we make that more hard? Of course we could. But
You don't really need to know.
so then one more that confuses people. If I just say probability of robot, do you get it's a very common answer to get 0.5 and it's wrong? Do you get, they go like robot, 0.5, see right there, 0.5. That's wrong. What's the probability of just robot? Like, what's the probability of R? Well, it's actually both things. It's 0.8. Why? Because these people say that they will someday have a robot. I know, they'll also have something else, but is that different than probability of only R? Yeah. That'd be somebody saying, I'm only going to have a robot. And that would be 0.5. Just make sure you get the difference between those two. Yes?
So like on a test, if we had a question like that,
Yep.
would it be written out like only R, or is there some sort of like marking, like for example?
No, there's no special marking. And so if we wanted to say only R, we would say only R. We would use the word only. And if you just say an R, though, you can't come up to me and ask, what does that mean? R means both of these are in R. They both think they're going to have robots. So those together make your answer. If we say only R, that implies they're not going to have an EV. They're only going to have a robot. So it's different. Okay, that's enough practice for today. And I would say tonight's homework is the most important one you've had, because tonight's your last chance to get it fixed if you got weaknesses. If you want to do something else, you could finish up the lab, which is due Wednesday, or you could get ready for the top 20, which is also Wednesday. That's all I got for you for today.